It should have been a peaceful day today, but high above, the clouds were churning and swirling. Rebecca Madison saw and heard the wind howling outside her car, but she paid it no mind. Inside the car, it was warm, so what did the bitter cold out there matter to her? It didn't. At that moment, only two things truly concerned Rebecca. First was the clock, the numbers on its face clearly showing 7:46. It was Monday morning, 7:46 a.m., and she needed to be at her desk at SMC, a pneumatic equipment manufacturer, by 8. She still had about a 15-minute drive left, and that was in the rare event that every traffic light turned green. She knew that wouldn't happen, but for now, she wasn't worried. She was still in the suburbs. The road ahead and behind was empty. She pushed the speed from 65 to 70 miles per hour. Her job involved customer relations. It wasn't glamorous, but it was all she had, and she was good at it. Recently, she had been taking more risks, arriving late more often, which was gradually becoming a bad habit. Well, it was easy when no one noticed. It wasn't every day, but at least twice a week she'd sneak in at the last minute. Things started to change when her supervisor noticed, and after their talk last week, everything became more complicated. Lately, everything had been too complicated, mainly because of her other problem at home, her mother. Rebecca had never married. She had lived alone for many years, and life was perfect that way. She thought that when she asked her mother to move in, it wouldn't be difficult. It was right after her father passed away, and she couldn't stand the thought of her mother living alone. She believed her home was the only suitable place for her. But over the years, she began to wonder if that decision was worth it. Her mother, now approaching her 95th birthday next April, was still a lucid woman. Rebecca saw that every morning. The only problem was that her mother couldn't maintain that clarity long. Her mother suffered from sundowner's syndrome. Every morning she was the woman Rebecca remembered, just with more wrinkles. But when night came, looking at her was truly disheartening, even unbearable. Rebecca didn't want to use that word, but it was truly a nuisance. This was why Rebecca was always late. She loved seeing her mother in the mornings, terrified to think about the state she would be in when she returned home. And there was so much to arrange. She had to lock the doors and hide the keys so her mother wouldn't wander off. There were so many medications. She had to help her to the bathroom and change her clothes. She had promised she would never put her mother in a nursing home, and now that promise was more binding than ever. Rebecca knew that if she put her there, she would never get to see her mother in the mornings again. It was difficult, but she and her mother always tried their best. She was determined to do so for the rest of their time together. That morning, the thought came to her again, as it did every morning. She should call her mother, talk to her a little more before the new day made everything exhausting. That was all she needed. Her mother didn't need to be healthy to help her push away the sadness. But as she reached for her handbag, she realized her phone was still on the nightstand. She had left it in her rush to get out of the house. She was bitter to the point of tears, from frustration, not sadness. All she could do was sit there, in the static of the radio, watching the dead cornfields silently pass by. She pushed the speed to 75 miles per hour, and the sound from the radio began to enter her mind. She started listening unconsciously, but not really hearing anything. Radio. Still unclear on the scale of the current event, the Chinese government has declared a state of national emergency. There is currently no official information on the events that have transpired in the last 24 hours, and China has refused all offers of support from the United Nations. No sources have confirmed further details, as communication with the country is difficult, and many intelligence satellites show widespread blackouts within the nation's borders. Rumors have begun to spread, from the plausible to the completely absurd. Although the intelligence community has strongly refuted most of these rumors, it is hard to ignore the fact that much of the news sounds very similar to the rumors last week about Somalia, where she switched from AM to FM. She didn't want to hear the news this morning. She preferred music. She allowed herself to get lost in the melody. A country song harmonized perfectly with the surrounding landscape. A silo slowly appeared on her right, a picturesque farmhouse next to it. And on her left, she saw an old blue Ford pickup truck pulling a horse trailer approaching. The Ohio scenery unfolded. She felt young again, and that was all she wanted. The moment was perfect. It made her completely forget the red, roadkill-like object on the road ahead. Her tire exploded violently. Only once before had Rebecca seen a tire burst. She was 7. Her father was driving. She remembered how calmly he handled the situation. He gritted his teeth, trying to keep the car steady on the road. He was tense, but controlled the car skillfully. She wished she could have inherited that from him. She screamed, and by reflex yanked the steering wheel to the right. Her car skidded onto the shoulder. She corrected the steering, just barely stopping the car from plunging into the ditch. The car skidded across the oncoming lane, facing the way she had just come. As she slammed on the brakes, she gritted her teeth, bracing for the worst, but luckily the car stopped without further incident. Everything stopped, except her heart. It was beating faster than it had in 5 years. She suddenly remembered the truck, but about 10 seconds too late. Fortunately, it was no longer a problem. The man driving the truck had managed to stop about 2 car lengths away from her. He had gotten out and was approaching her window. A light tap on the glass brought her back to reality. "Are you all right, miss?" he asked, full of concern. She looked at the old, thin man with a thick mustache and sun-tanned skin. He squinted at her. When she nodded, he nodded back. "My phone's in the truck. Hold on, I'll be right back." He turned and hurried back to his truck. Meanwhile, she unbuckled her seatbelt, feeling as if she'd been punched in the chest by a gorilla. Her head was heavy. She realized she was dizzy as she took her first step out of the car, as if walking on jello. She gripped the car door, her fingers white-knuckled, fighting against the fierce wind. The wind was so strong it felt like it could push her over, or even sweep her away. She closed her eyes, gripped the door, and took a few deep breaths. That probably would have helped calm her down if the old farmer hadn't accidentally startled her upon his return. "Sorry, you okay?" "Yes," she said, trying to reassure herself more than answer him. "I'm fine. Are you okay?" "I'm sorry, did I scare your horses?" "I stopped in time, miss, and this trailer's empty. Horses are about 10 miles back. Did your tire blow?" She wasn't sure. Everything was still spinning. "I think so. Damn it, I hope not. I don't have a spare." "It's okay, miss," the farmer laughed, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "Everything will be fine. Let me see what happened to that tire." He was very kind. He gently guided her by the arm, making sure she didn't stumble. They slowly walked around the front of the car. They saw the front right wheel was nothing but the rim. The tire was shredded, as if she had driven through a field of barbed wire. "Oh boy," the farmer exclaimed. "Looks like your tire has seen its golden days." He shook his head in disbelief. Rebecca felt nauseous. The wind continued to whip her face, chilling her to the bone. The farmer didn't seem to mind. He looked back toward the piece of tire lying on the road. "We should clear that off the road," he said. She reluctantly agreed. She wasn't annoyed with him. She just wanted to get back into the warm car. Her thick coat wasn't helping. She pulled her fluffy black gloves from her pocket and put them on. The warmth didn't come as quickly as she'd hoped. She now had a reason for being late, which should have made her feel relieved, but she realized she needed proof to explain it, a difficult task since she forgot her phone at home. "Hey, thank you for helping me, Mr.—" She trailed off, hoping he would fill in his name. "Sanders, Phil Sanders." "It's nothing, Ms. Rebecca Madison," she said, shivering. "Does your phone have a camera?" He looked at her, then smiled, holding up a black smartphone. "I may be old, but that doesn't mean I don't know how to use technology." "Sorry," she interrupted, laughing with him. "I didn't mean anything by it." "Just kidding, miss. So, what do you need the camera for?" "I left my phone at home." Another gust of wind hit her, making her shudder. I was wondering if you could take a few pictures for me, mostly for my boss. Got it. I think we can arrange that. They approached the remains of the tire. The tattered remnant lay about 50 yards from her car. The rubber had peeled off the rim, the tread was face down, and the torn rubber fibers curled up like flower petals. Looks like it just landed here, Phil said, observing the rubber. He bent down and grabbed both sides, trying to lift it, but couldn't. The ends lifted, but the middle seemed stuck fast to the road, as if glued. He took a deep breath and tried again. "What is this?" he asked, groaning as he tried a third time. He chuckled. "Good grief, girl, what on earth did you run over?" "I don't know," Rebecca said, clutching her chest. "I didn't see anything. One second the tire was fine, the next, it wasn't." She hesitated as Phil tried a fourth time because she saw something underneath the rubber. She only caught a glimpse, but it looked like something red. "Wait," she said. "I think it's stuck to something." "Stuck how?" "Super stuck, I guess," he laughed. Rebecca looked both ways down the road. Seeing it was clear, she urged Mr. Sanders to try again. This time, as he did, she saw that red mass again. At first, it looked like a giant wad of bubble gum. She froze, then knelt down. It stuck to something sticky. Sticky what? Phil set the rubber back down and knelt beside Rebecca. He turned on his phone's flashlight, shining it under the rubber. It was true. A mass of sticky, viscous gunk was stuck to the tire. It was wet and reeked. The wind carried the stench straight into Rebecca's nose, making her nearly vomit. It was a rank, pungent, and warm smell. It was the smell of a corpse. "Looks like you hit a raccoon or something," Phil said, backing away. "Damn, a fresh one, too. But that's strange. Why is the tire stuck to it like that? I've never seen anything like this." "Me neither," she said, her hand over her mouth. "I don't see any fur. It just looks like a lump of meat." "Well, if you hit them hard enough, that's what they look like. I'll call the state troopers right away. We need someone younger than us to handle this mess, you know what I mean?" Smiling, he escorted her back to the car. He kept talking as he dialed. "I think I should call an ambulance too, get you checked out." "No need, I'm fine," she said, smiling to reassure him. She didn't want the trouble. "I think the state police will want that anyway. Might as well get it all done at once," he persuaded. "Maybe, but I'm fine, just a little dizzy." "You want to call them yourself?" he offered, letting her decide. "I don't want to put words in your mouth." He laughed and handed her the phone. She hesitated but took it. "Thank you," she said, taking the phone. "It's nothing. Now, let me see what we can do about that tire first. I think I have a jack in my truck." Just as he finished his sentence, a loud thwack came from her car. On the hood, a large, round mass the size of a college textbook had just landed, denting the metal. On closer inspection, it had the exact same texture as the thing she had run over. In the clear light, it looked chewed up and spat out. Rebecca looked up, seeing only the dark clouds in the sky. She didn't know what she expected to see, but she hoped for some clue. That thing couldn't have just fallen from the sky. "Dear God," Phil yelled, moving closer. He only got so far before he had to pull his shirt up over his nose. "Was that there before?" Rebecca asked, trying to rationalize the appearance of the meat lump. "I don't think so. I think it just fell on your car. But from where? God, it stinks." Step by step, Rebecca approached the horrific mass. Her stomach churned. She glanced at the angry clouds above. Whatever it was, or had been, there was no sign of what it was now. It didn't look like anything natural she could think of. Just a slimy, shapeless mass. A stream of red liquid dripped from it, slowly running down the hood. She tried to dismiss the thought that it could be blood. Blood from what? It wasn't meat, was it? The only part that wasn't blood red protruded from the top. It looked like a small white column. And while the rest of the mass seemed soft, this part was solid. As she got closer, Rebecca realized it branched into two white prongs? She took a step back as her mind processed what it was. "Is that a tooth?" she asked, though she was sure it was. She didn't know what the mass was, but the protruding thing was definitely the root of a tooth. Maybe a human tooth. Phil didn't have time to answer before Rebecca emptied the contents of her stomach onto the black asphalt. She crumpled to the ground, her head spinning and throbbing. "It can't be," Phil said, his voice less cheerful now. "That can't be." Another wet thud. This time, the sound came from the field, accompanied by a hideous crack. Rebecca didn't want to look, but she did. Dead corn stalks were thrown into the air. Before they could fall, another slimy mass landed next to them. Dried corn leaves and stalk fragments stuck to the sides of the mass, adhering to it. The mass rolled and balanced, reacting to the impact. More chunks followed. Another fell behind them, nearly 200 yards down the road. Before it could fall, another fell onto the road behind Phil's truck. Rebecca saw it fall straight from the sky. No sign of being thrown. It just fell. Another chunk hit the bare trees on her left, the weight of it breaking the high branches. Another hit the top of the silo, making it ring like a large bell. The mass stuck fast to the top of the silo's dome, as if glued. Rebecca looked up at the sky. High above, the clouds swirled, while the chunks fell from somewhere in them. At first they appeared as black ink drops against the gray sky. But as they fell, they took on color and transformed into the disgusting, slimy masses now scattered everywhere. They fell faster and faster, thicker and thicker. Horror enveloped Rebecca as a chunk landed less than a foot from her arm. A splay of warm red liquid splashed onto her face. It was raining rotten meat. "Get up!" Phil said, also looking at the sky with a mixture of vigilance and disgust. He turned back to Rebecca. "Ms. Madison, please get up now! You have to get in the car before—" As if in a cruel cosmic joke, a large piece of meat, nearly the size of a pillow, struck Mr. Sanders on the right shoulder. The impact dragged him down, but he stayed on his feet. He couldn't stop himself from screaming. "Oh my God!" Rebecca yelled, rushing to his side. The chunk was still stuck to his arm. The damn thing seemed to have fused to his shoulder and arm, forming a grotesque, rigid jelly, pinning his arm to his body. Small bits from the impact stuck to his face and chest. He gasped in pain. "I think it broke my shoulder. Damn it, get it off! Please, get it off!" he begged. "Yes, wait," Rebecca said, her eyes still scanning the sky. Every passing second, the meat shower fell thicker, heavier. She felt insecure, afraid the next chunk would hit her head. She pictured it sticking to her face, covering everything in rotting darkness. She turned to the injured man. She put Mr. Sanders' phone in her pocket. She slowly reached her gloved hands toward the disgusting mass stuck to his shoulder. She tried to dig her hands into it, squeezing. As she did, she felt her fingers slowly sinking inside. She winced as the unwanted warmth seeped through the gloves. Mr. Sanders raised his other hand to help, but it too sank deep into the mass. She took a deep breath, unfortunately inhaling the stench, and pulled hard. She made Mr. Sanders stagger forward, but the mass didn't budge. It clung to him like glue. After another pull, she realized her hands were also stuck tight. "Pull harder!" Phil groaned in pain. "Pull!" "My hands!" Rebecca panicked. "My hands are stuck!" She tried wiggling her fingers, but they were trapped. She tried again, this time pulling downward. She used all her strength, but only managed to pull Mr. Sanders to the ground. He fell hard on the asphalt, almost pulling her down with him. "It's no use," Mr. Sanders grimaced, tears starting to flow. As she pulled him back up, Rebecca realized this wasn't working, so she tried to free herself. She didn't want to, but survival instincts urged her on. They couldn't waste another second out here. She struggled, twisted, and pulled, but the disgusting thing held faster than anything she had ever seen. She tried pulling with her left hand and pushing with her right. The left glove came off and part of her hand was free. She realized she could pull her hand out of the glove. "Please, try again," Mr. Sanders begged. his voice pathetic. He couldn't open his eyes anymore. His shoulder was at least dislocated, and she knew it. She couldn't do anything alone to pull the mass off his arm. The most important thing for both of them now was to find shelter, fast. She tried to pull her hand out of the glove. The rain of meat fell faster, heavier. Another chunk hit her car, right on the cabin roof. 3 more hit Mr. Sanders' truck, all too close for her to feel safe. Mr. Sanders didn't realize what Rebecca was doing until it was too late. "No!" He shook his head. "No, please don't! Please try again! It hurts! It hurts so much!" She braced herself and pulled, yanking her hand free from the glove as another chunk, the size of a tire, hit her car's windshield. "I'm sorry, I can't do anything right now. We have to find shelter. Get back to your truck. Just stay there until it's over." She didn't hesitate. She turned, opened her car door, while Mr. Sanders just staggered back. He began to drag himself toward his truck, limping, groaning. He looked up at the sky through teary, terrified eyes. Rebecca slammed her car door shut just as a thud hit the roof. She screamed, fumbling for her keys. They were in her coat pocket. That reassured her, but then she felt something else. A phone. Mr. Sanders' phone. She took it out and looked in the rearview mirror. Outside was a wash in the meat shower, and Mr. Sanders, he hobbling through it. By some miracle he had made it that far. He almost reached his truck door. A small book-sized chunk fell on his left foot, sticking it to the pavement. Rebecca could only watch as he slammed to the ground, face down. He had no choice but to submit to the sky above. She tried to watch him through the rear window, but the thick flesh now stuck to it blocked her view. She could only watch the horrific scene through her side mirror. He looked so desperate. The pounding rain of meat drowned out all sound, but she could still see his head moving. He was screaming for help. A larger chunk fell on his back, breaking it. Another crushed his legs. Meanwhile, Rebecca sat still, motionless. She was safe, and fear kept her glued to the seat. If not for a chunk of meat that had swallowed her side mirror, she would have seen another one fall on his head, smashing his face into the asphalt below. It was an accidental mercy. She began to hyperventilate. She didn't know what to do. The rain outside just kept falling, endless. In reality, the rain only lasted for a few minutes, but it felt endless. It seemed to stretch on for hours. During that seemingly infinite time, all Rebecca could do was scream. She climbed into the back seat, away from the cracking windshield, and hugged her knees to her chest. She held herself while the heavy rain covered the car, enveloping her. Soon the slimy chunks would cover every inch of the car and windows. They swallowed the light. She was left alone in the dark. Long after the rain stopped, Rebecca was still crying in the dark. Luckily, the windows had held back the meat shower, but they couldn't stop the stench from flooding in immediately. The smell threatened to suffocate her, but now she didn't even notice it. Finally, Rebecca could move her limbs, but she didn't want to. The car had protected her, but she still felt surrounded, like a child hiding under the blankets, afraid to let any limb stick out, fearing the monsters would grab it. The darkness wasn't total. A faint light penetrated the gaps between the slimy chunks outside. A pale red light seeped through the cracks, creating flickering streaks that covered the car like lightning. But it wasn't enough to see clearly. When she couldn't stand the weight of the darkness any longer, she reached for Mr. Sanders' phone, lying face down on the dashboard. She fumbled, dropping it to the floor. The light from the phone immediately shone, blinding but welcome. After her eyes adjusted, she found the flashlight function. She was relieved to see the phone wasn't locked. She turned on the flash, and the whole cabin lit up. She wasn't prepared for what she saw. A suffocating fear gripped her as she saw the things clinging to the car. They were pressed against the glass as if they were hugging her. The glass had held, except for the rear window, which was almost shattered, but every piece and crack was held firmly in place by the disgusting slime. They didn't move, silently embracing the car. Rebecca suddenly remembered the story of Jonah and the whale, and she imagined this must be how Jonah felt. She was being swallowed. She needed to get out. She turned over, hesitantly reaching for the door handle. She pulled the handle, and when she heard the click, she pushed. Her whole body threw her weight into the door, her face pressed against the window. But the door didn't budge. The chunks outside held the door fast like glue. They resisted her. Opening the door was like trying to move a mountain. Rebecca screamed in despair. She couldn't be trapped in here. Not here! She panicked, pushing harder again and again. She threw all her weight against the door, but it wouldn't move. It was like trying to break through a concrete wall. After trying every door, she realized they were all sealed tight. She was truly trapped. And calling for help was not an option. She had tried calling 911 3 times on Phil's phone. No matter where she was in the car, she had no signal. The slimy chunks had swallowed the light and all hope of contacting the outside world. The car seemed to be shrinking by the second. Angry, she kicked the window hard, hoping to break it, hoping the things would fall out instead of in. If they stayed stuck without the window, she would try to use a sharp piece of glass to cut her way out. With a powerful, determined kick, she slammed her heel into the window. The only result was that she nearly broke her leg as her knee hyperextended. The pain sent her back into her original fetal position. She started crying, begging for someone, anyone, to help her. Instinct told her that if she screamed, someone would hear. Someone would come. Someone would help. But her heart told her that was a lie. And indeed it was, for a long time. Soon she was exhausted, her voice hoarse. Not a sound came from outside the car. The wind had stopped with the rain long ago, and since then there were no more sounds. No birds, no cars, no people. That silence allowed a small crackling sound to be heard clearly. Outside. She froze, listening. She thought it was a hallucination, but then another crackle, and then another. She realized it was real, the sound of someone stepping on dry leaves. Something was moving outside. The crackling got closer to her car, and she heard a voice. "Anyone in there?" An old, hoarse voice, muffled by the chunks. "Anyone in the car?" He didn't need to ask a second time. "Yes," she screamed, scrambling to the window. "Yes, please help me. I can't get out. Please, sir." The man moved closer. He stopped right outside her window. "You're covered. This stuff is almost impossible to move. It's too sticky." "Wait a minute. It's starting to dry. I have some tools at my house. I'll be right back." Rebecca smiled and thanked God. He must live in the house next to the silo. Everything was going to be okay. "Yes, please, thank you, sir," she said, rushing the words out in one breath. The crackling sound resumed, faster now as he turned to walk away. Relieved, she knew it was almost over. But the day was determined to destroy her hope. The crackling stopped. Rebecca pressed her ear to the window, trying to listen. The uncomfortably warm glass pressed against her face. There was nothing but the sound of her own blood rushing in her ears. Then a groan, a long, drawn-out groan that lasted several seconds before turning into a gurgle, a gasp. Something had happened to the man. He was only 4 or 5 meters from her car. He cursed and groaned. A louder crack sounded, followed by a long moment of silence. That silence hung in the air, and Rebecca pressed herself harder against the window. She whispered a hello in her breath. Then the silence was shattered by his scream. Rebecca recoiled from the window as if burned. "What?" she asked frantically. "Sir, are you okay? Hey, are you okay?" She didn't understand. Had the man fallen? Maybe he tripped and fell? But could that possibly hurt him so much? His scream was like a wounded animal. It paused for a moment, just long enough for him to gasp for air, and then the scream continued, growing in volume and intensity. "What is it?" she begged. "What's happening? Please, are you okay? Say something." Finally, he answered, his voice high-pitched, strained, and full of agony. "Stay in the car." He seemed to choke on the last syllable as a terrifying shriek ripped from his throat. Amid the agonizing cries, Rebecca could only catch a few words of what happened next. "Stay, it's growing. Feel it. Don't get out. Oh God, no!" And then abruptly, the screaming stopped. Silence returned, and Rebecca trembled. Her mind was racing, her breath short and quick. Tears warmed her cheeks. No, she couldn't let him leave her. She didn't want to be alone again. "Hey, get up! What happened? Sir! Sir!" In her panic, she took the phone and tapped it lightly against the window glass. That's when it moved. Almost perfectly matching her movement, one of the slimy masses stuck to the window began to shift. The light showed her every disgusting moving fiber. A coin-sized section split in two, then bloomed open. This surprise made Rebecca pull back. At first, she was just startled, then disgusted. The small part separated to reveal something new underneath, small, round, and moving. Rebecca realized she was looking at an eye, a seemingly human eye. The thing had opened its eye and was looking into the car through a dull blue pupil. It glanced around for a second, then locked its gaze directly at her. "No!" Rebecca whispered, as if saying it would change her reality. Horrified, she couldn't look away from this unwanted staring contest. The eye held its gaze, then blinked. Rebecca wondered what this creature of flesh and blood was thinking. She couldn't resist its soulless gaze. It revealed nothing. Could it think? Why was it looking at her? Why was any of this happening? Then, in her peripheral vision, at the very edge of the light, she saw it. Another eye had emerged from the fleshy slime. When she shone the light on it, she saw that eye was also staring at her. She couldn't possibly see her. Its eye, originally brown, now had a deep red gash running through the pupil. Despite the damage, the gaze followed her no matter where she moved in the car. Both eyes tracked her. Soon they were everywhere. Every piece of meat that had fallen from the sky and stuck to the car eventually opened a single eye, and all of them were fixed on her. She no longer felt alone. She felt like a trapped animal, a fox caught in a snare. The hunters didn't need to act, they just needed to watch. Wait. She was their prey. Rebecca dropped the phone. The light cut out. The car was plunged back into near total darkness. The dark might have been a comfort if she wasn't so sure those eyes were still watching her. She knew the darkness couldn't protect her. She didn't know how much time had passed in the car. Rebecca wasn't sure if she had passed out or simply lost track of time. But when she regained some consciousness, it was late afternoon. The phone, its battery down to 15%, showed the time as 4:50 p.m. She should have been home. Instead, she was lost, trapped. She needed to be with her mother. Perhaps it was that realization that helped Rebecca regain her mobility. From one seat to another, from one corner to the next, she scrambled, searching for a signal. The phone's battery kept dropping. Time passed, but still no signal appeared. She couldn't find any signal. Carefully, she angled the phone toward the window. A sliver of light reflected back, enough for her to see some of the fleshy patches outside. To her relief, the eyes were all closed. She checked each patch, wondering if the gaze was just a product of her extreme fear. The slimy masses had returned to being shapeless, colorless lumps. And that was better. If she was lucky, maybe the eyes had never existed. She wondered if the man outside had ever really existed. Since she let the darkness take over, no sound had come from outside her own breathing. The cold, unnatural stillness was heavier than the darkness around her. She was still completely unaware of what had happened outside, nor what the outside world looked like. Had the rain been widespread? No help had come, and she didn't dare believe it would. Maybe she was isolated. Surprisingly, that thought made her feel relieved. In that case, at least there were still people out there, and eventually she would be rescued. The alternative hypothesis was much more terrifying. Was it possible the meat rain had spread everywhere, covering the whole country, the whole world? Rebecca shuddered as she remembered China. Something had happened in China and Somalia. Had the rain happened there? She cursed herself for turning off the radio. Was she alone? Truly and completely alone? She still hoped there were people out there. But what if they had all met the same fate as that man? Maybe the car had protected her. Her savior was also her jailer. She was trapped in her own chaotic stream of thought. This reminded her of a specific childhood memory. She remembered the day her father accidentally ran over a poor cat. They were in the old F-150 under the bright sun. A fat gray cat suddenly dashed into the road as if it had been waiting for the truck. It couldn't have timed it better. She still remembered the feeling, the bump as the front wheel went over it, then the bump of the rear wheel finishing the job. Her father told her not to look. He pulled the truck over to check. Rebecca didn't listen. She turned to look through the back window. All she wanted was a small peek to make sure the cat was okay. That dark curiosity cost her. She remembered Mr. Sanders' words just a few hours ago as that horrific image flashed in her mind. Other than its head held high and its eyes wide open, nothing else about it resembled a cat. They had hit it so hard that red overtook the gray. It was no longer an animal, just a piece of meat. If you hit them hard enough, that's what they look like. It was all just meat. So maybe these things were meat too. That seemed the most logical theory, but also the most unbelievable. She couldn't accept it. Meat from what? How could meat fall from the sky? It had to come from somewhere, right? She tried to push that thought from her head. It made her sick. She thought of the eyes that looked very human. Another thought began to form. It took root in her head like a tumor. The question came, is it possible those things used to be people? No, they weren't people. This was too horrible. Too much death, too much meat. It was impossible in every sense of the word. Where would they get so many people? It would have to be millions. Millions of people killed? In China, there are billions of people, she thought. Maybe something worse than the rain had happened in China. No, she told herself, stop it. The thought vanished like a bad sound. It didn't matter now. She hadn't been paying attention. She was only worried about her own problems. What good did it do to wonder where they came from? Who cares if they were people or not? She felt choked up. All she needed was to get out of here. Her mother still needed her. Sweat rolled down her face. Outside it was only about 30 degrees, but inside the car it was getting hot. Those slimy chunks were the culprits for sure. They radiated heat, and their warmth transferred directly into the car. Tossing off her coat and sweater, she used her sweat-drenched undershirt to fan herself. Rebecca wondered how long it would take for them to cook her, if that was possible. She decided she wouldn't let herself die from the heat of disgusting meat chunks. Placing the phone on the dashboard, she moved to the driver's seat. She didn't like this. The slimy masses were too close. But if she let herself get baked any longer, she wouldn't be alive to regret it. Back in the driver's seat, she couldn't stop thinking about driving away. It was impossible, but it was a hope. The windshield was obscured by the chunks, and they might also be holding the wheels fast to the ground. She would never move, couldn't go anywhere. Wondering if the noise would anger the masses, she remembered the eyes. Hours had passed since then, and the eyes hadn't returned. She thought that if they wanted to harm her, they would have done so long ago. Rebecca started the car. The engine turned over twice and then roared to life. More hot air blasted from the vents in humid, heavy waves. She gagged as a new stench filled her nose. It took a moment for the air conditioner to kick in. The radio was silent, as she expected. While waiting, she tried hitting the gas, curious if the car could move at all. Shifting into drive, she gently pressed the pedal. The engine revved, but the wheels only twitched slightly. It felt like she was trying to drive over a curb. She gave it more gas, but the car didn't budge. She cursed the damn wheels and her rotten luck. A groan echoed up above her. Not a growl from the masses, but from her car. The roof was denting. Something was pressing down on it. Through the window, she saw the slimy chunks twitching. They were starting to move, reacting. It was definitely the sound of the car. She had accidentally woken them up. Cursing her mistake, Rebecca yanked the key from the ignition. The noise died, but the things didn't stop. They struggled, jostled, shoved each other in the tight space. Maybe they were looking for her. Rebecca held her breath, waiting. The movements made the car shake from side to side. The car rocked, swaying harder and faster. She felt like she was going to puke. The steering wheel was the only thing to hold on to. Luckily, the shaking didn't last long. Just a few seconds later, everything stopped. The car settled. The air was still. Rebecca let out an exhausted breath. She let go of the wheel, but as tears welled up, she reached for the phone. She had endured enough. She had never been so desperate to talk to her mother. Still no signal. The battery was at 7%. Her heart sank. She fell back into the seat, too tired to cry. Everything was hopeless. Rebecca wasn't sure what made her check again. Maybe habit. In the back seat, she was still unconsciously refusing her fate. Looking at the phone again, she was amazed. Weak, but finally a connection had appeared. 1 bar. Rebecca wasn't sure her fingers had ever moved so fast. She dialed her home number. She put the phone to her face, but didn't know if she could utter a word. Her trembling hand covered her mouth. No demon on earth could compare to the next 10 seconds of waiting. Each ring hit her like a blow, tearing her deeper than any of the disgusting chunks outside could. Joy gave way to pain. She could only hope that God, if there was a God, wouldn't let her down. That's what her mother always said. Her mother always had faith. And this time, her faith was rewarded. "Hello?" A weak voice came through the phone. Weak, but alive. "Oh my God! Oh my God, Rebecca? Is that you?" "Who is this?" her mother asked. Normally that question would break her heart, but today it was all she needed. "Mom, it's me, Rebecca. Are you okay? Tell me you're okay." "Of course I'm okay, dear. Of course I'm okay. Why wouldn't I be?" Rebecca raised her fist and kicked her feet a few times in childish joy. The smile on her face was impossibly wide. Thank God. Her mother was safe. That meant there was hope. Maybe this nightmare wasn't as widespread as she feared. Maybe, just maybe, there was still a chance for her, for everyone. "Mom, is anything happening over there?" "Nothing at all," her mother sounded puzzled. "There's not much here. Someone should water the plants." "Should I water the plants?" "No," Rebecca said. "Don't go outside." "Mom, listen to me. Can you turn on the TV? Is the TV saying anything?" "Do you want to talk to Rebecca?" her mother asked, confused. "No, Mom, I'm Rebecca." Rebecca should be home by now. She always comes home." "I'm sorry, dear. I'm a little confused." Those words stung her heart. "I'm coming home. I'll be home soon, I promise. I'll be home." "Okay, dear. You be careful. I'm going to water the plants now. Should I do that? It's raining so hard today." Rebecca froze. No. It couldn't be. Had the rain spread that far? Her house was miles away. But her mother was fine. Maybe she was just lucky. She was inside, and as long as those slimy chunks stayed outside, she would be okay. But the flowers. Rebecca knew her mother's nature when she wasn't lucid, and if she was really determined. Mom, listen to me. I've never been more serious. Do not go outside, okay? Mom, I'll do what I want. Only Rebecca can... Mom, Rebecca screamed, don't leave the house. The plants don't need water. Listen to me. Rebecca stopped. If these were the last words she ever said to her mother, she didn't want them to be screams. She took a deep breath and pleaded, Mom, please, wait for me to get home. We'll water the plants together. Just wait for me. Silence. Okay, dear, her mother replied. You're coming home? Me and Rebecca will water the plants together. They need it. I'll be home soon. Her last words choked. I love you. The call disconnected. The phone had 3% battery left, about to plunge her into darkness. But now she had to act. She had to get out. She couldn't save Mr. Sanders. She couldn't help the other man, but she refused to let anyone else die. Not her, not her mother. No one. Adrenaline surged through her veins, and with a warrior's roar, Rebecca threw herself against the car door. It budged. The flashlight flared as the phone's battery died. Every last bit of battery was precious, and if it died, Rebecca's hope would die with it. She threw herself against it twice more. She put her right shoulder into it, then her left. The door moved slightly, but still didn't open. A small sliver of light pierced the edge. Both her shoulders were aching, so she lay on her back and kicked with her feet. Battery at 2%. Her legs ached, especially her right ankle, as the old pain returned with a vengeance. The pain didn't slow her down. Even though every kick seemed futile, she refused to stop. She would get out, or die trying. She didn't know how true that statement was. A slimy mass moved in the corner. The light slipped through the newly formed crack between the door and the car. She didn't see it until it almost touched her foot. When she saw it, she immediately pulled her knees to her chest. A thin, tentacle-like piece of meat had entered the car. It fumbled forward on what looked like fingernails. Battery down to 1%. There was a noise behind her. Turning her head, she saw she was surrounded. Through the other door, more tentacles were squeezing in. In the center of the seat, there was no safety left as both sides closed in. The rear glass began to crack as more slimy bits pushed through the gaps. They squeezed through every shard of broken glass, dragging bits of debris on their tips. They were coming for her, but she was ready to face them. If anything, their intrusion only motivated her more. Now her life and her mother's were on the line. With the heel of her boot, she stumped on the first tentacle. It twitched, pinned to the seat. At first she thought the liquid seeping out was blood, but it flowed slowly, thick and viscous. It stuck to her boot like syrup. She screamed in disgust, kicking the tentacle to the floor. "Get away from me!" The door had been pulled ajar by the slimy masses to let the tentacles in, and she saw her chance. She gathered a final kick with both feet. The flashlight died, and with a final scream, light flooded the car. In the last few hours, she had thought of everything that could happen. Every scenario played out in her head like daylight nightmares. The memory of the other man had fueled most of those thoughts. She thought of the crackle under his feet and his horrific screams. She wondered what she would see out there, but she was more afraid of what might find her. Rebecca wondered what the world would look like when she got out, but nothing she imagined could compare to what she found. As soon as she kicked the door open and jumped out of the car, she suddenly felt like she was standing on a distant planet. A loud crunch sounded as her boots hit the ground. It was like she was standing on thick snow. Those things covered every inch under her feet. In fact, they stretched as far as she could see, from one horizon to the other. The slimy masses covered the landscape. The scene reminded her of Mars, because there was no green left. Red stretched to infinity. The terrain was rugged, and all the trees she had seen along the fields were gone. The only things that rose above the terrain were the hard shells around houses and cars, which now looked scaly. Most were still standing, dotting the landscape in every direction. The man's house was still there. His porch had shielded his front door from the rain. The creatures had dried and hardened, forming a cave around the house. It was a relief to see they hadn't completely invaded everything. The silo had fallen, its pieces scattered next to the house. The weight of those things was probably too much for it. Rebecca hoped her house had held up better. When she saw the old man, she couldn't help it. She screamed. The old man stood motionless, kneeling between her car and Mr. Sanders' truck. He must have been checking on Mr. Sanders just as he had done for her when those things got him. She saw it crawling up his pant leg. A cluster of tentacles, much like the ones that had entered her car, had slipped into his pants at the ankle where his skin was exposed. One of them had burrowed deep into his flesh. She followed the cluster up like a snake. They coiled around his leg. They crawled up his body, and she thought she could see the tentacles branching out beneath his clothes. They wrapped around his torso, but they all stopped before reaching his neck. Blood soaked through the upper parts of his blue button-down shirt. The most horrifying part was his head. It was forced back, fixed in place, and his mouth was wide open. From it sprouted dozens of small blood vessel-like stalks, ending in red plant-like petals, reaching for the sky. Liquid circulated inside them, as if being pumped from his heart. These gruesome flowers wouldn't have terrified her so much if not for his eyes. They were still open, staring straight at her. Then he took a weak, heavy breath. He was still alive. She sobbed, but her stomach was empty. At the old man's feet, she saw a bulge rising from the ground, and another gruesome flower cluster sprouted from it. Rebecca knew they marked Mr. Sanders' grave, if she could even call it a grave. Was he still alive down there? Could that be possible? She prayed for mercy and for Mr. Sanders' forgiveness. She knew she didn't deserve it. No, she couldn't have imagined this in her worst nightmares. Those things had grown through the man's body, possessed him. She screamed again when she saw his stomach convulse. The man winced as something moved inside him. Rebecca wasn't sure if there was a worse fate. The old man, with his wide, terrified eyes, motioned downward. It took a few motions from his gaze for her to understand, but when she did, she followed his look down. Rebecca hadn't noticed before, but there were small fibrous structures rising from the slimy masses, each a few inches tall. They looked like red ferns. A similar one was wrapped around the old man's ankle. Looking down at her own feet, she realized she had stepped on one. The pressure from her boot had activated one of the tentacles from the mass below. Slowly, it reached out. It fumbled around, searching, but couldn't grip the material of her boot. They weren't plants. They were traps. She nodded to the man and thanked him. He didn't need to speak. She understood that it was critical not to let those blood-fern tentacles touch her skin. She didn't want to leave the old man. She even wanted to help him. But he groaned in protest, He waved his hand weakly, signaling her to go. "Go!" He tried to speak through his choked throat, but no words came out. Rebecca knew it was too late. So she moved toward his house, forced once again to leave someone behind. A single tear rolled down the old man's cheek. It was like crossing a minefield, but Rebecca moved quickly and skillfully. Luckily, the blood ferns were sparse. If she accidentally stepped on one, her boots provided enough protection. The ground beneath her crunched like breaking snow. As she stepped on something new, she heard another sound, a crunch. This time not light like snow, but heavy, like breaking glass. Lifting her foot, she saw it had landed on a mass. Numbness kept her moving, despite the horrifying discovery beneath her boot. Now there was no doubt. She was right. She had just stepped on a watch. Through the gaps in the slimy mass, she stepped onto the porch and found the door unlocked. The house was empty, at least from what she could see. She called out a few times to check, but no one answered. That made her incredibly grateful. She was still alone, sure, but she didn't want anyone in that house to witness what had happened to the old man. There was a picture frame hanging crookedly on the wall. In it, the old man stood with his family. He looked about 5 years younger, and his wife and 3 adult sons smiled beside him. The eldest son held a child on his knee. That child would probably be only 8 years old now. She didn't want to imagine what had happened to them. She was lucky to find a set of keys on the kitchen counter, and even luckier that the garage door was open. Inside was an 80s-era Chevy with peeling red paint. Rebecca looked at the road ahead, hoping the truck would be enough. If those things couldn't get through her boots, they definitely couldn't get through a truck. They were dry, and that meant she could drive easily, hopefully. She hesitated before getting into the truck. She had a terrifying vision, the thought that the rain would return. They would fall again, and she would be trapped again. This time there would be no one to help and no hope left. She took a deep breath, calmly opened the door, and sat in the seat. The engine roared, and it was the sweetest sound she had ever heard. The terrain was rugged at first, but she quickly got used to it. She set a course to cross this alien land. The road had disappeared beneath the surface of flesh, but Rebecca still found her way. The houses, though covered, were enough to guide her. They formed the skeleton of the map in her head. The rest she remembered from memory. Amidst the indescribable, grotesque landscape, she drove. The trees had grown in unbelievable numbers. The rain must have infected whatever it touched. The larger the creature, the larger the tree that grew from it. As she passed a farm, she saw large bushes sprouting from what used to be a herd of cows. They were buried, but she had passed them in the morning. She was glad most of these trees were hidden. She didn't want to know who was lying under which grave. On the way, she saw several horrific sights. Cars were rare, but she found no living people in them. She slowed down to check, but every car had at least one door open. No one had made it to shelter inside. Instead, they were trapped outside. The lucky ones, those who weren't buried, could only watch as Rebecca drove by. One man was stuck to the side of his minivan, his arm outstretched toward Rebecca, but she couldn't stop. There was a couple, a man and a woman, that broke Rebecca's heart. The woman was infected at the knee when she fell. The man's hand was frozen in place, clutching the plant stalks growing from her mouth. He had been trying to pull them out, but the tentacles had used that to wrap tightly around him. They entered him through his wrist. They stared at each other. Neither looked at Rebecca as she drove past. They were trapped by their love. The mystery of her situation was partly solved when she saw the helicopter. It was pulled down in one of the fields, and around it was something surprisingly completely natural. The helicopter had created a large crater around itself, a crater of dirt and fire. The flames from the crash had incinerated the slimy masses around it. It had created a radius about 3 times the length of the helicopter. Rebecca couldn't believe the sight of dirt and fire could make her so happy. It was wonderful to see those things pushed back, burned, and defeated. That feeling died when she saw the swirling clouds above. An eye, as if in the center of a hurricane, opened above. The wind kicked up and seemed to want to lift Rebecca's truck off the ground. Slamming on the brakes, she could only watch in stunned silence at what happened next. From within the giant eye, 3 large shapes gradually emerged, blacker than night. Giant tentacles hung lazily from the clouds. They were thicker than skyscrapers and twice as tall. They hovered over where the helicopter fell, as if observing. Rebecca couldn't breathe as one of the tentacles retracted toward the cloud. Its head split into 5 parts, 5 fingers. She could only stand and watch as the hand, if she dared call it that, disappeared behind the sky, then returned with something enormous in its grasp. Debris fell from its hand like sand slipping through a fist, falling to the ground. The giant hand held its position above the barren patch of land below. Then it began to loosen its fingers. Like rain, pieces of meat fell from the sky, covering the ground. They covered the helicopter, extinguishing the fire in moments. The spot looked as if the disturbance had never happened. The giant creature above seemed satisfied with its restoration. It brought the remaining meat back into the clouds. The other 2 tentacles hovered around the eye, observing their massive handiwork. One tentacle split into fingers and gently touched one of the trees below. It was like a gardener tending his garden. That disgusting metaphor gave Rebecca her greatest enlightenment. The rain, all the infected people, they were nothing more than fertilizer for this garden. The creature above disappeared into the sky, and the eye closed. Rebecca no longer prayed to God for help. She cursed his name. The journey took nearly half an hour. The town she had called home all her life was now desolate, without a sign of life. Thankfully, very few people were trapped outside. She didn't want to know if those blurred, hidden figures were her friends or relatives. She just drove past. She hoped, that most had found shelter indoors. Driving past the shops, she witnessed the truth. The doors were shut tight, but those things had still crept inside. People stood motionless, stuck to the glass windows like tortured mannequins. Some random movements happened behind the windows, but she dared not stop. Her house was close. She couldn't recognize her home anymore. The once beautiful 2-story house with its yellow paint and a stained glass rose on the front window was nowhere to be seen under the thick filth accumulated around it. Rotten meat chunks covered her house, and nothing could disgust her more. That's what she thought until she got out of the truck and went to the back of the house. Grief was not strong enough word to describe Rebecca's feelings. After all she had witnessed, survived, and fought, it all led to this. She could only do so much. Fate was cruel that day. Her mother was kneeling on the ground holding a full watering can. Her old eyes met Rebecca's. They were still blue, still radiant. The vines had not completely taken over her body, but Rebecca saw them moving. Only in that moment was Rebecca grateful for her mother's condition. She was glad that maybe, just maybe, her mother didn't understand what was happening to her. She didn't seem to be in pain. With the last bit of strength of a defeated and broken woman, Rebecca ran into her mother's arms and held her tight. Her mother surprised her one last time. "I love you, dear," her mother said. That was all Rebecca needed. "I love you too, Mom," she replied. "I think you were right," her mother whispered into Rebecca's ear. "I think the plants probably don't need this water after all." Rebecca laughed one last time as the infection claimed her.